want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Lance Velchek here, for Arrow in the Head's The Fucking Black Sheep, where we take a look at the opposing opinion of the genre's most divisive films. It's that time of the year. We must say farewell to the summer and get into my favorite season, Halloween. A holiday that isn't about love, family, giving thanks, country, religion, but blood, guts, whiskey, horror movies, and candy. With a bit of love for our dark angel rising from the eternal darkness to bring pure pleasure and pain. And this year we get the return of a horror icon, the boogeyman himself, Michael Myers. This new Halloween, confusingly titled Halloween, takes place 40 years after the original John Carpenter film, omitting the much beloved sequel. Now, as one of 3 people in the world who doesn't really love part 2, and now, I do own it. And I do watch it every few years, hoping I experience something that'll change my mind. But besides the underrated and beautifully named Lance Guest, and the always badass Donald Pleasance, I think the pacing is awful, and the hospital setting is wasted and uninteresting. It's shot like a made-for-TV movie. But I do know I'm alone, so stop yelling.
Fuck you!
What makes the Halloween franchise different from the other mainstays is its uncertainty in its own continuity. Look at all these damn timelines. Rob Zombie was a divisive choice to remake a film that was in no way in need of one. A thankless job if done perfectly. The original Halloween has not only aged well, but it's just as good if not better today than it was 40 years ago. Like my man Jimmy O recently said, remakes and sequels can be great in the right hands. Now, I wouldn't say Rob Zombie's stab at the Halloween remake was a success, but I don't despise it like most. I personally liked the first half, as it felt more like a specific vision, while the second half was just a rehash of the far superior original. While studio demands were an obvious roadblock with Rob Zombie's Halloween, he was given free rein to make his own film with part 2. And that's where I would argue Halloween 2 is the only sequel in the franchise that feels like an actual fleshed out story.
Fuck you, man.
Yeah, I get it, but give me a chance. Because Halloween 2 is the best since the original. Since the director's cut is the only available version on Blu-ray, and because this fleshes out the relationships more and has a far better ending, we're going to discuss the director's cut. The first thing you should notice is that Rob Zombie isn't shooting on the standard 35mm like he did for part 1. He's going the Devil's Rejects route here and filming on 16mm. Even blown up to 35, I love the film grain here. It adds to the rawness of his directing style. This approach isn't smooth or static because the tension is built with a gritty realism. John Carpenter made his mark with slow building tension. The shape wasn't as much of a man, but an entity. He was something unstoppable but never emotional. This was the original slow walker. That was done to perfection, and Rob wanted to completely tear down any expectations of what Halloween was. Risky? Yeah, it sure was. He wanted his films to put Michael as the focus. This was his journey, just as much as it was Laurie's. This was the opposite of Carpenter's vision. It was brutal and unnerving. When Michael's around, we feel the movement. The camera follows every stab, and he always seems to give one more for good measure. Again. And again. Even the way he frames some of the shots gives off a documentary type of feel. When Laurie is first brought into the hospital and they are cleaning her wounds, it's frighteningly real, like we're peeking in on someone's lowest moment. Jesus, look at when they remove the piece of metal from underneath her fingernail. The point of this entry is that we need to purge the idea that this will in any way be a traditional Halloween film. With any entry in a beloved series, one must try and subvert expectations, which is a tight rope to walk. But with Rob Zombie in full control, he was subverting the notion of what this sequel should be. In the same brazen switch that gave us the Western road trip Devil's Rejects, from the trippy origin of a house of 1,000 corpses, we switch from the standard slasher origin story to a sequel about the effects of intense trauma and PTSD, with a supernatural spin in the vein of a brutal David Lynch. This is in no way fun. It isn't supposed to be. I've always heard Laurie is annoying and unlikable here. Yeah, no shit. Good, I don't want to like her. I want to see someone broken. For Christ's sakes, I want something real, cause and effect. I can still empathize with someone out of control. That is the point. Rarely do big budget horror films ever show or deal with the consequences of survival. Look at the disaster that is H2O, which got the same love and attention pre-release that Halloween 2018 is getting. So never forget. But after 20 years, this was her damaged. Come on, I wake up like that constantly. And a bit on edge? I am high strung just being alive. Step up your game, Jamie, step it up. And I'll give credit to the new one for having what would be a far more realistic portrayal of someone who is haunted by her violent past. Laurie is 2 years out and is in a downward spiral. Moved into Annie's house and being somewhat adopted by Sheriff Brackett, we see the pain of the retrofitted family dealing with grief and the burning question of how one moves on. Annie and Laurie's relationship is now fractured. Instead of growing closer from their shared pain, it has driven them apart, both scarred physically and mentally, the former being a cool visual. Laurie has been blaming herself for the events of the first film and is lashing out at Annie, who seems to have found a bit of closure.
Guess I know what I'll be yakking about in therapy today.
One day at a time, babe.
The duality between the two is depressing, but realistic. How we process grief isn't a uniformed procedure, and not everyone is lucky enough to have hope. Scout Taylor-Compton really commits. She's fantastic as a woman losing her grip on reality, and her pain feels real. The only blonde I've ever loved.
Motion to me.
Sheriff Brackett is the only one that seems to be holding everything together. Brad Dourif's version of the character is heartwarming and relatable, but even he can't escape Michael's wrath of destruction. You can tell his quiet existence is crumbling. Laurie's night terrors are keeping him up at night.
Did you hear Laurie last night?
Yes, Dad. I hear her every night. Please, God, don't say anything to her.
I mean, look at those dark circles. He tries to be a father to both girls, tries to be the leader of his town, but you can see it has taken a toll. When Michael finds his way to Brackett's house, looking for Laurie, we find out that Annie didn't escape death to survive and deal with the aftermath. Just to lose it by the same force of nature is sadly ironic. When Sheriff Brackett gets the call and rushes home, this is what I want.
Let me handle this.
Where is she?
I don't want to go in here, Sheriff.
I want to feel something. Watching him break down is perfect. To lose your child, it nearly brings me to tears. His little girl is gone. There isn't a scene this heartfelt in the entire series. Michael has gone full woodsman with a great beard, hiding out and healing, living off the land. This version of Michael is by far the most grounded, yet the film as a whole is the most surreal. Now, I get that a maskless Michael journeying with his dead mother and younger self on a murder road trip may be too different, too far-fetched. And I get it, I do. Loomis isn't the hero, he's been corrupted by fame and a real son of a bitch. And I get it, I get that Loomis needs to be the champion to most. I do. But everything here services the story. Loomis may be unlikable, but it's his journey from hero to villain to then find redemption. And that works. We end at an abandoned barn where our grieving sheriff is trying to help the girl he saved so long ago. And yes, everything here is different, to a point where some can't call this a Halloween film. And maybe if my loyalty was more rooted in a purest passion for the character, I may even agree. But I love that this is so radically different. It's a sad tale. No one wins here. We see the ending to a small boy whose nurture and nature led him here. His path caused so much pain that no one could escape. As Laurie lay there dying, we see her tunnel of white light represented as a long hallway. Laurie Strode would never escape her past. She is now home.